Okay, thanks, Rob. That was a great introduction, so there's not much need for me to extend on that. So I guess I can sort of start the presentation and start taking you through FreshMvvm. So as Rob said, I'm MVP. I do a lot of blogging, so if you ever want to head over to my blog and see the stuff that I'm talking about, I actually haven't done it for a while because I've been so busy, but the plan is to get back into it. So I have a company with a few employees where we do Xamarin all day and night. We love it. We do a lot of Xamarin.Forms projects, a lot of project rescues. So a lot of people tend to get themselves into trouble with Xamarin.Forms, and we sort of come in and help them dig themselves out of holes. And we do a little bit of training as well. So I guess I'm going to take over the basics of what Mvvm is, just to give you a bit of a primer so you understand the concepts and what's actually built into Xamarin.Forms already. So Mvvm is a design pattern. It stands for model, view, view model. So your model is your domain entity classes like a quote or a contact. Your view is your view, so if you have a quote, it would be the view of the quote, so we have a quote number, you have a total amount of that quote, and your view model is your public properties and your commands and the view logic surrounding the view that the user is seeing. So the idea is the view model contains the logic, and there's a clean separation between the view and the view model, and you can actually change the view around. So you can see here this diagram, you've got your view, model there, and there's a data binding system there. In your view and your view model, you've got your presentation logic. And then on the back there, you've got your model and your business logic with your data. So why is Mvvm good? So it's decoupling. So you're decoupling your view from your view logic. So if you had to, you could easily have a different view for your phone and your tablet device. Or if you wanted to change your view, it becomes a lot easier to change your views around. Cleaner code, and it's more testable. So a lot of the stuff we do with Fresh is to enable testability. So everything's based on interfaces. We do a lot of constructor injection just so we can easily isolate different parts of the application. So what do you need? So I just want to break it down what we actually need for Mvvm in the sort of traditional sense. So you just need the views, the view models and the models, a binding engine. So as we can see per the diagram. So can we do Mvvm with Xamarin.Forms? Yes, everything we need to do Mvvm in Xamarin.Forms is already there. So we've got the views, we've got the data binding system, and we've got the view model support. So you can see here, Xamarin.Forms, we've got a binding system there, so we can bind first name to the text property, and we can also do that in XAML. So that's already built in to the framework. So bindable view models. So in .NET we have the notify property changed event, which is already built into the .NET framework, and that's what Xamarin.Forms already uses. So since Mvvm is already built into Xamarin.Forms, why would you actually build another Mvvm framework? So Fresh actually was never meant to be a framework. It was meant to be not a framework. So when I started it, I was doing a project using traditional Xamarin and mono-touch dialog, and we were using Mvvm Cross as our Mvvm framework. And on the day that Xamarin.Forms was released, we decided that we wanted to use Xamarin.Forms because the project was a perfect candidate for Xamarin.Forms, but we didn't actually want to take the whole of Mvvm Cross across to Xamarin.Forms. For good reason, because Mvvm Cross has a lot of code which is related to the data binding of the native UI elements, which is not needed at all in Xamarin.Forms. So we didn't need the majority of actually the code that Mvvm Cross provides. So that's why we just removed Mvvm Cross. So what we actually did was we removed the Mvvm Cross assemblies, but we left a lot of the code the same, and we filled in all the parts underneath. So the view model, navigation, which was something that Mvvm Cross had, and the Ioc container. And when I did that, I actually did it as a not a framework. So I did it so I could take it to different projects and have it as a sort of an open framework that I could use. So I did a blog post June 18th, 2014 on how to roll your own Mvvm in Xamarin.Forms. And that was the beginning of FreshMvvm. So it was kind of the basic parts where you have your constructor injection and you have your view model navigation and you have your route navigation or your navigation services. So yeah, loosely based on Mvvm Cross. So origins from the Forms 1.0 release, used in early versions of many real-world Xamarin.Forms applications. And organically it became very useful. So as I said, it was never meant to be a framework. It was meant to be not a framework, something that I had more control over and I could twist the way that I wanted to. But it actually just became so useful, and I kept on copying things across between projects that it made perfect sense to actually put it into NuGet as sort of a very simple, helpful library. So the framework part just happened. So what do I need fresh? It forces you to have a good architecture. So a lot of people, if you go into create a new Xamarin.Forms application, and so there's two options. If you actually know how to create your own Mvvm framework, or you know how to roll your own one, there's going to be a lot of boilerplate code that you're going to be writing. So with Fresh, you actually have to do that boilerplate code. And the other option is if you don't really know how to put together a good architecture with the Mvvm, you're probably going to get yourself into a big mess. So by using Fresh, you're kind of, and doing it the Fresh way, you're setting yourself up to succeed more than if you try to do it yourself if you didn't know what you were doing. So we, even though we know how to, say, build our own architecture, we still use Fresh because it's easy. It's got all the stuff that we need built in, and we sort of add features to it as we need it. So as I said, it avoids the boilerplate code, wiring event, creating objects, navigation, and it fills the gaps that Xamarin.Forms doesn't have. Light and simple. So I only add features that really need to be added. I try and actually keep it fairly simple. I don't try and add as many features to it. So you'll notice that even the code base of FreshMvvm itself is fairly small, and it's specifically designed for Xamarin.Forms. So what you'll actually see with Fresh is there's got some some details that you won't actually see in other Mvvm frameworks with Xamarin.Forms because it's specifically designed for Xamarin.Forms. For instance, in Xamarin.Forms there's a notification when a page is being popped, which is your only notification that that page is going to be cleaned up, so you can clean up your objects from your page or from your view model. But that event actually has a few issues and it doesn't always fire. So in FreshMvvm, what we've done is we've sort of polyfixed those issues, so you actually get a better indication of when your page is being popped and it's not being used anymore. And it uses a convention over configuration and borrowed the good parts from Mvvm Cross. So you'll actually hear me talk about page model and not view model. Because Xamarin.Forms uses the concept of pages, so does Fresh. And if FreshMvvm actually has the ability for you to use page model or use view model or use whatever sort of naming convention you like, you just have to configure it the way that you want to. But by default, you can use the page model or the view model naming conventions. So I'm just going to take you through a demo of your first FreshMvvm app. So I've got here, if I can find my cursor. So I've got here like a application that I've already started. So I've done a lot of the sort of the basic work for it. So you can see here I've already brought in the FreshMvvm package, Fresh Essentials, which is just a little tool that I use, and the property changed from Fody. I've already gone through and set up some views. So you got your contact list page, your contact page that you can see here, and a contact. So very simple, just a name and a phone number, and then also for a quote. So you got quote's got the customer name and the total. Got a quote list page, quote page. Now if we go down here to the database service, I've created a little database service. So if we look at this interface here, it's an in-memory database, so just helps us be able to understand how the Ioc Container and how Xamarin.Forms, FreshMvvm and Xamarin.Forms works together. So you got your database service here, you've got your contacts, update contact, get quotes, update quote, and that's about it. So the app at the moment doesn't have anything inside it, so there's nothing in there. So you've created a new project in So you created a new project in Xamarin Studio, and you've created some views. So what you do first is you come down, you bring in FreshMvvm via the package manager, and so I've got my view here. I've got my contact list page. Now I want to be able to create a page model for this page. So if we, based on the defaults, you can either use the page model or the view model. In this case, I'm going to use the page model naming convention. So if I make a contact list page model, so if you notice the naming convention there, I've got a contact list page and a contact list page model. So that automatically links the page, or the page and the page model. So if I go FreshMvvm, so there's a fresh base page model which you inherit your page models from. So now that I've inherited that, we can see that I've got my contact list page model. If we try and override and see what we've got here, we can see that we've got an initialize method, which is the data that can be passed in, a reverse initialize, the view is appearing and the view is disappearing. So these are basically linked up to the appearing and disappearing events in Xamarin.Forms pages. So in this case, so when you start an application, or when you start a page model, you can either override the initialize method or the appearing method. So the initialize method would primarily be used when you want to take data from the page before. So you'll notice when I actually go from contact list to the contact page, I use the initialize method to take in the contact. Whereas the view is appearing, you would use to download data. So because I need my data, I don't want to be able to new up a database service every time I create a page model or a view model. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a database service inside my constructor. So the way FreshMvvm actually works is when you push between page models, the constructor is automatically injected with whatever's in your ISE container. So now that I've got this database service coming into my page model, I need to obviously have something inside my ISE container. So normally what you can do is have a little method in the application class to set up the IOC. So I can go fresh IOC and register that. So I register my database service. So there's a few options when registering the ISE. So you can register it as a multi-instance. By default, it'll register it as a single instance. But here you can actually call these methods as multi, as singleton. So you can register it as a multi-instance, a singleton, using the constructor. So let me just check that's correct. Oh, we got the squiggly line there. I think it's around the wrong way. There we go. So, I'm in the ISE container. I'm registering the database service as an iDatabase service. So one thing to know with Fresh, it's got a built-in ISE container, which is based on Tiny IOC, but you can actually implement your own one if you like. So if I jump in here, so if you want to, you can go and implement your own ISE container as long as you conform to this interface, which is the Fresh ISE interface. Then you can register your own ISE container. So now I've set up this ISE. I'm going to call it when we start the application. So now whenever I create a contact list page and a contact list page model, this will automatically be injected into the constructor. So each time the view is appearing, I want to actually get my contact. So open up my database service, get my contacts. So I'm actually just going to create a list of contacts.
Hey, Michael. Quick
Yes.
question. What's the difference between the singleton and the multi when you're working with the IOC?
So the single instance, it'll only have one copy of it, so it'll only new up the ISE container once. So in the database service here, when it actually creates, it'll create it once. So here, whenever I get the database service from the ISE container, I'm just getting the same one. So when I update a contact, it'll actually update it in that local or that single database service. It's while if you're using a multi-instance, it'll create a new instance of the database service every time.
So
in
this case, because it's an in-memory database, we want to make sure we don't lose it across the application. You want it persistent in memory, so you're going to have it as a singleton. But for other objects, you might want it to be created, used, and then destroyed.
Yes. Yeah, so it defaults to the singleton because that's what we use mostly. But if you have to, you can use a multi-instance. Say you want to use a timer event, and it's coming out of the ISE container. The timer service would be a multi-instance because you only want one instance of that per page model or view model. So I've got my contact there. and I update my contact list on this database service here. So that's every time this view appears, which means every time it's pushed to, or if a page has been opened and then you're coming back to the contact list, then it'll refresh this data. If I had chosen to do it on the initialize event, when you're coming back to this page, it wouldn't refresh that data because the initialize event only happens once, while the view is appearing can happen multiple times. So if we have a look at this contact list page, you can see here I've got my item sources contacts. So if I go back and check here, I've got my contacts item source here. I'm filling out that data. One other thing you'll notice is I've got an item tap command. It's a little bit different than built-in Xamarin.Forms because it's using Fresh Essentials. So what that actually does is it automatically wires the tapped event to a command, and then it'll actually also do the deselection for you. Because I know if you've ever done the list view before, when something's selected, it'll stay selected, and you have to manually unselect it. So this will sort of take care of it for me. So I'll create a command. So because I'm data binding to a list of contacts, and that's what's actually in the list view, I know that this command is going to be passed to contact. So I've got my item tap command. So when I tap my item, I've got a contact coming in, but I guess I want to be able to actually go to the contact page. So if we have a look at our contact page here, we've got this set up with a view, but we haven't got a view model. So I'm just going to quickly create a contact page model. So this time I'm going to use the initialize method, and I'm going to create a property of contact. So one thing that I'm actually going to do in these is implement the property change. So this isn't sort of vanilla.net. It's a tool called Fody. What that does, before, if you remember, I was mentioning that to have a bindable view model, you need to implement the iNotify property changed. So in here, this is a manual implementation of the notify property changed. So you can see when the first name is changed, that event is raised. So what this does is this will automatically implement the property changed event for me, and I don't have to go and manually implement it. So it'll actually happen at the IL level. It'll go through and it'll, after the compilation goes through, then Fody will come through and it'll change all these properties to actually implement the property change notification. So when this contact is set, the property the notify property changed event is set, is raised. So I'm going to actually do that on this as well. So I've got my contact here. In my initialize method, I've got my initialize data. Now what I'm going to do here is if the contact is null, I'm going to create a new contact. So now that I've got my contact page, when it's tapped and we've got a contact, I can call the call methods .push page model, contact page model. So you'll see here, I've got this property called core methods. Previously in Fresh, these methods were part of the base page, but just to enable testability, I abstracted them out into an interface. So you'll see here that core methods, up the top there, you can see that FreshMvvm I page model core methods. So all these methods are based on an interface, which you can easily set in your tests, and you can be testing that this page model has been pushed. So it is designed around testability in that way. So I'm pushing my page model, which is a contact page model, with my contact. In my contact page model, I'm receiving the data. If there's no data, then I'm going to create a new contact. So I might actually just set that up now. So here I set up the IOC. Now I want to be able to set up the navigation for the system. So FreshMvvm has this concept of a navigation service, which it actually has built-in navigation containers, which are navigation services. So these navigation containers are basically near sort of copies of the Xamarin.Forms navigation pages. So you can see here you've got a navigation container, which would be your standard navigation page. Then you've got a tabbed navigation container and a master detail. There's two tab navigation containers. I'll actually go into that in a little while, but they're a little bit different in the way that the navigation works for the two different navigation containers. So this is a little bit important to note the way that you put together navigation in Fresh. The way that Fresh works is it's a little bit closer to Xamarin.Forms, and to explain it, you kind of have the flexibility, and you have I'll explain this. So because it's a little bit closer to the way Xamarin.Forms is, you actually have the flexibility to control things, but you also have to know how you want things to work, rather than it sort of deciding exactly how you want your navigation to work. So let me create my contact. So we want to start off with the contact list page. So because this is the first page in the navigation stack, I have to resolve it. So this resolve page model will it'll link up all my pages correctly, so I don't have to worry about how everything's working. I just call resolve page model, and it'll actually return me a page. If we go over that, we'll see we've got a page there. And then I'm going to put that into the navigation container. So I've got my main page here with my main navigation. So if I build that, let's see how that works. Yes, so with Fresh, because we use it a lot in applications that we build, which can be any sort of number of applications, any sort of navigation requirements. We actually have it so you have to be more explicit of how you want the navigation to work in the system. So you have to choose that we want this navigation joined here. So we don't make decisions for you on how your overall navigation is going to work. You make the choice yourself. But we just have all the tools there so you can make that choice. So this is actually quite a common thing that you'll see with Fresh, so it's probably good that I'm going to take you through this. So what we can actually see, file not found. So it's unable to load the contact list page. Okay, so what actually the problem is there. So you see how I actually had to go to the console output. I mean, what you can do, you can actually go into the exception, into the ini exceptions, and actually find out the final error message. But I just find it easier just to let the application crash and then go into the output. But what I've actually made a mistake of doing is not including the Fresh Essentials in my native package here. So if I go into my packages, Fresh Essentials. So Fresh Essentials has a native code, which means you actually need to include the package inside your native projects. So what you might actually notice is in my native iOS here, I have Fresh Essentials, I have Xamarin.Forms, but I don't have property changed or FreshMvvm. That's because these assemblies are pure portable class library, which means you don't actually have to include them in your native packaging. So let's see if that one works. There's another one. That's interesting. Just going to try it again. Actually, in Xamarin Studio 5, before 6 came out, I had this really cool plugin where I could obliterate all the output paths. Oh no, that's not nice at all. So I'm just going to try and remove this package. So one thing to note is when the contact list page is created here, or whenever you're pushing to a new view or a new page model and page, the binding context is automatically wired. So when you've got a page here, say the contact list page, what that actually has underneath is a binding context, which is normally what you set your view model or your page model to. But by just doing this single line here, that's automatically done that for me. So it's automatically wired the binding context, and it's actually automatically not good. I think I might just remove that. Don't know why it's giving me trouble this morning, but it's not what we're doing, so I can just remove it. What I can actually do is remove that. Now, this is not something that I would normally do. I'm a bit of a purist in that I don't like to have much code in my code behind. So if you're not aware, when I say code behind, I'm referring to the code which is behind the XAML rather than the page model. So generally, I try to keep all my code as far as like view logic inside the page model. And then all the view stuff inside the page, and avoid using the code behind. I only actually do it if I have to. So I'm just going to quickly go contact list page model. Going to go, because I know the binding context is actually this page model. And then I'm going to execute the item tap command. So this is actually a good example because you can see how here I've got my binding context and I've got my contact list page model, and I'm casting that, and I'm confident that I know it's going to be that page model because it's the convention over configuration, and if it's set up correctly, it's always going to be that page model. So let's have a look at that there. Let's see if we can run this now. Okay, so this is our contact list. You can see here we've got our page, we've got our text cell with the name and the phone number. We've got a little add button that's not connected to anything. So you can see here we're going back and forth. So that's the basics of FreshMvvm. So we've got the contact page, we've got the contact page model. So what I might actually do is we'll just go back to the slides because I've got a more complete application that we can look at rather than typing out the same thing again. So we've got the page model to page model navigation. As we mentioned, it automatically wires the binding context. Automatic wiring of the page events, the appearing events, the disappearing events. Base methods, so the initialize, we saw that. So custom Ioc containers. I mean, it's good to note that we pretty much never change the Ioc container. The only time that you would really want to actually change the Ioc container is if you have a specific requirement to. We've actually only had to do it once when the application framework was an application framework which was used on a back-end application as well that we brought into the mobile application. So we saw our dependency injection there, and the built-in navigation types. So I might just give a little demo of the different built-in navigation types. But rather than writing up the code there, I'll just jump straight into a sample application here. So this application is actually the FreshMvvm codebase. So the FreshMvvm codebase is just here, and it's also got a sample here. To look at the sample, if we have a look, so you can see here, this is my application. I've got sort of 4 methods here to load the basic navigation, load the master detail, load the tab navigation, load the first only tab navigation, and a custom navigation. So let me just run this application so we can see. So what you'll notice is how I'm actually able to change the navigation without actually changing any of the pages or anything underneath. So the page models, so the contact list, the contact, the quote, and the quote list are all the same, and the pages are all the same. But just by changing a few lines, we're actually able to completely change the way the navigation works in the system. So this is the one that we've already seen, which is your basic navigation page and jumping in and out of things. So if we go home, you can see a master detail page. So here you've got your menu here. So this is how the built-in master detail works. But what I find that a lot of people end up doing is you do actually need to modify the way the navigation container works based on your requirements. So usually you will just inherit from the built-in navigation container and change it as you would like. So you can actually join the navigation containers together and create your own custom navigation. So there's a tab navigation. So this is the initial tab navigation that we had in the system, which worked well for about 75% of the cases. So you notice here that you got your contacts, you got your quotes. When I actually go into a contact, the tab bar is still present. And then if I change to the quote, it's still got my quote list there, and I can still go back to the contacts and go back to the actual contact. You'll find this is how a lot of applications work. So here I've got two different navigation pages. So the way this actually works is you've got a tab page first, and then inside that tab page you've got a navigation container for the contacts, and then for the quote you have a navigation page also. So you've got 2 navigation pages underneath there. So if we go into the first only navigation, so you notice here I've got my contacts, I've got my quotes, it's the standard sort of tab page, but when I actually click into it, the tab page actually disappears. So there's 2 different types of navigation pages in this case. I guess I might have to see if there's any questions now. I think it might be a good time. Does anyone have any questions? Well, I guess I can look through.
Yeah, so Michael, there are some that some people ask here. We can start at the beginning. So if we go back to the beginning, quick question: what's the difference, if you know, between FreshMvvm and Mvvm Lite, for example? So you talked a little bit about Mvvm Cross. Do you know how it compares to Mvvm Lite?
Yes, so I haven't actually had a look at what exactly Mvvm Lite does for Xamarin.Forms. I mean, I've had a look at what Mvvm Cross does for Xamarin.Forms, but I think let me have a look. Actually, I won't actually have a look. Yeah, when I actually started FreshMvvm, the Mvvm Lite didn't have support for Xamarin.Forms at all. So I actually don't know what support MVVM Lite has for Xamarin.Forms at the moment. I guess it's always ever changing. Like it was only recently introduced that they had the Xamarin.Forms support, but I'd suggest that what it would be kind of a sort of a similar. You might have to roll your own navigation containers for MVVM Lite. And sort of, I think last time I looked, there was some basic sort of navigation built in, but generally you would have to create your own navigation service for Mvvm Lite to get it working with Xamarin.Forms.
Yeah, and we have a guest lecture up on our site from Laurent, the author of MVVM Lite as well. So it might be interesting to go through for all the attendees and anybody who's interested and kind of compare those, because Laurent really took us through MVVM Lite there as well. So we can definitely take a look ourselves as well. Another question, just to be sure. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, MVVM Lite actually works without Xamarin.Forms, so it's actually a little bit different in the way it works. The reason that you would use Fresh versus MVVM Lite is if Fresh is specifically designed for Xamarin.Forms, so we use it when we decide that Xamarin.Forms is our platform of choice for our application. And Mvvm Lite is probably a better choice if you want to use, say, other platforms, or you want to have your own sort of architecture, or you've got view models that are shared somewhere else.
Right, and that's a good point. MVVM Lite's been around for a very long time, so it supports a lot wider berth, and it wasn't specifically designed for forms, like you said.
Yeah.
Question, how well does FreshMvvm work with other packages, like Forms Toolkit, MVVM Helpers, Humanizer, etc.? And if they don't, why would you not want to use those controls with FreshMvvm? So things like Forms Toolkit.
So Forms Toolkit, I haven't actually seen that. When we started Fresh, we started on the 1.0 days of Xamarin.Forms, so there wasn't much around. I mean, obviously that's changing day to day. So Forms Toolkit popped up. I can't remember when that came in, but because Fresh is fairly mature, we haven't sort of. Well, it's kind of got everything that we need, so we haven't really looked around at what's popped up recently.
All right, great. And I think our last one, or no, would your IOC container replace the Xamarin.Forms dependency service, or could it work in conjunction with it?
Yeah, so generally I do now. I just use the Fresh IOC. So just say I have a service in my native controls here. Just say I have like a what we can say? We have like a sound service. So if I had a sound service in here, I actually previously I was using the Xamarin.Forms one, but it got a little bit strange to actually have two kind of IOC containers. So now if you bring the package into your Android application or your iOS application, you can actually call the IOC container and put your dependencies directly into the Fresh IOC container. So yes, I guess the answer is to that. It's probably better just to replace that dependency service.
Yeah, and
that's the dependency service.
I was going to say the Xamarin.Forms dependency service is a service locator, not a dependency injection container, and you're using dependency injection. So if you want to go with dependency injection as your dependency architecture, then you would definitely use the Fresh MVVM. And once you've done that, there's really no need to choose two of them. You would try to keep the same container, not introduce another one. I think they fulfill different purposes. Now, does your IOC container, does it also support the service locator pattern or just dependency injection?
No, just dependency injection.
So you can't just manually go resolve a dependency from somewhere?
Oh, yes, you can if you want to. But generally, you'll never have to do it.
Right.
I mean, you can. Sometimes you do have to do it. Just say you're lower down in a view and you don't want to sort of pass everything down. Sometimes you can just get the resolve it manually. So if you go into here, so if I do FreshIoc.container.resolve, you can actually resolve that.
Okay, so it can completely replace the dependency service as a service locator if you wanted to do that. As maybe you have an existing application, for example, that's using dependency service, and you want to start transitioning over to using FreshMvvm. Anywhere that you're using dependency service, you could get that same behavior just by resolving from the FreshMvvm container.
Yeah.
Great. So I think you might have covered this already, but in your opinion, when do you think you should choose FreshMvvm instead of other frameworks like Mvvm Lite, Mvvm Cross, for example?
I think if you're choosing to do Xamarin.Forms as your architecture, you definitely should consider FreshMvvm. We use it a lot in production applications, so it's got lots of little things to help you get you out of trouble, especially with the more small details of navigation that primarily you probably have to roll yourself. So there's a lot of built-in stuff there, which I'll get into. But yeah, so it's only if you've actually decided that Xamarin.Forms is what you want to use.
Okay, and another question. So if you have an existing application that you've built with Xamarin.Forms, how hard would it be to add FreshMvvm to it? Piece by piece, or would that be something you would recommend not doing or doing?
Yeah, so we inherit a lot of rescue projects, and normally they've sort of got a bad architecture. And what we do is the first thing we normally do is we implement FreshMvvm, and we do the conversion as a bulk conversion. So we kind of like put in the effort straight away, which normally with Xamarin.Forms applications isn't too much work. I mean, it's a bit of like restructural changing, which you can sort of get done in a couple of days. And so I wouldn't do it in a sort of half manner. You'd come in and you'd say, okay, well, we're going to put together our views and our view models, and we're going to do it in the correctly structured manner. And it isn't too hard to do it. Do it as a full conversion. So that's what I would recommend doing. Rather, because I don't know how it would work trying to sort of just take certain areas of it and use it. It's kind of designed to be your main application architecture.
Right. Okay, and let's see. So we have about 5 minutes or so left. Can you get through more, or do you have more?
Yeah. Okay. What I can actually do is, what have we got here? Actually, we can jump straight to this one. So just to understand some of the unique things about FreshMvvm and what are the reason that we use it in so many projects is it's got like these 4 levels of navigation abstraction. So you've got the built-in navigation containers, the custom navigation containers, and the multiple navigation containers. So built-in, which we've already seen, would be like your tab navigation, the master detail navigation. Then you've got your custom navigation. So you can implement an interface, and that would become your navigation container. So let me just open this application. So you can see here I've got a custom implemented navigation container. So if I open up this application, go home. So here where I go down to custom navigation, so you can see this navigation is a mixture of a tab page and a master detail page. So you're jumping between things. So you can see this is based on a master detail page, and it implements the iFresh navigation service. So anytime you want to actually have your own complete navigation service, you can go in. You just need to implement this navigation service. So you can go through here. So this actually has a master detail, and it also has a tabbed navigation container. So what I'll do in a lot of applications is I'll create a directory which is my page containers, and you'll see here I actually inherit one of the built-in navigation containers, and then from there I can actually, with more complex scenarios, by inheriting it, I can actually control the navigation in sort of minute detail. So that's the custom navigation containers. So we also have this feature of multiple navigation. So a good one to actually test this on is the iPad. So that's the custom navigation, which is a single navigation container. What I actually found was a lot of people wanted to have the ability to show something modally and have a new navigation system and a new navigation service. So if we have a look here. So you can see here this is an example of multiple navigation. I've actually got two navigation services running at the same time. So if you want to have two different areas where you've got your navigation running, so that's one example of it. But if I go home, I can go into a basic navigation. It's not there. Which quotes here. So I can actually show modally another navigation service. So you can sort of continually jump into as many navigation services as you like. So I can show another master detail again. I'm not sure what that is. So that's the multiple navigation containers. And then there's a fourth one that we've added, which is multiple navigation stacks. So sometimes you want to be able to have two different stacks that are there, and then you want to be able to quickly swap them out. What this actually does is it swaps them on the main page. So I've got an example of this if I run this application. So this might be where you have a login page, and you want to swap out the navigation on that. So say this is a welcome page, and then you've got your navigation page. The user authenticates, and you want to swap out the main page. So what that does is it has both the navigation engines or both the navigation services, and you swap them out. So if you have a look in here, see I've got my navigation stack. So you've got your login navigation stack and your main app stack. On the login page, see here I've got this method where you can switch out the root navigation. So let me just check back here. Yeah, one other thing to note is we actually have events where you can clean up pages. So the page was popped. Generating this doesn't actually work anymore. I don't know why, but yeah. So there's an event there to tell you when the page is popped. And we sort of do a best effort to make sure that this always gets fired whenever the page is not going to be used anymore. Do we have enough time? I can give them another little demo.
We're about at the end, but we can go a little bit longer, so we can give you a few.
Okay. So I just wanted to show some of the more finer details that you can actually do. So if I do new movie recording, this is the So these are two applications that we've been working on. They're not released yet. So if we just open up this InvestSmart application, if my internet works. Okay, so you can see here how on this navigation, I've got down the bottom, I've got the tab navigation, but on the side, I've also got this master detail navigation. So, and what you'll actually notice is if I click on one of the watch lists here, it just swaps the watch list but doesn't fully reload the page. So you can see that the watch list has been changed there and here. So what that's showing is it's showing where you can have the more finer control of how you want the pages to work. There's one more thing I'd like to show you. So this application hasn't been released yet, so there might be some crashes. We're still working on it. But so if I go into this page and I start recording myself, so just notice on this page, so this is the page that we're actually recording on. And now when I'm going to stop this recording, and I stop it, see how I'm going to go back here, but we skip that page. So what actually happens in this case is we've pushed to another page, but we've removed the page from underneath the stack there. And that sort of feature and that sort of granularity is actually built into Fresh, it's because we actually use it to build our applications that we build for clients. There's lots of, I guess you'd say they're either finer details or dirty hacks. I don't know. It's up to you how you actually interpret them. But you can actually get any sort of UI that you like. And another example is if I go into here and I go into script. So I'm on the script page here, but then when I actually go into rehearse the script, then when I close it, the script page isn't there anymore because we don't need it, which you'd struggle to do, I think, with a lot of other systems. And that's about it. So here I've got some links. Most of the content relating to FreshMvvm is on the README in GitHub. So that's the link that I showed you before for rolling your own MVVM. If you have any questions to ask, the best place to do it is on the forums. And then you can send me an email and say that you've put a question on the forums. I prefer to keep the questions on the forums just so other people can also use those questions and answers for reference. And then obviously it's available on NuGet. And yeah, that's about it. So any questions? I'll leave the links open there.
Yeah, so we had a couple come in as well. Quick question: when you're developing on the Mac, do you use Parallels or Fusion, and why? Like if you wanted to use Windows.
No, we use Fusion. So
yeah,
we don't have a big preference. We were using Parallels, but I've been told that Fusion is actually better for cloud integration, so you can easily publish up your your VM into the cloud.
Cool.
But apart from that, we don't have a big opinion on that at all, really.
All right, so how did you remove the page from the backstack? Can you go back to that code, or can you show the code for how you did that?
Yes. So, I mean, I can't show you the actual code. What I can actually do is show you how it's done. So, in the page model here, so just say I'm on this contact list page, and I push to the contact page, and I don't want the contact list page. What I can actually do is I can push to the contact page, and then I can actually go remove from navigation. So I'm pushing to a new page, and I'm removing myself from the navigation. I can actually also remove based on the page model, so I can remove a what would I want to do? Maybe a quote list. Yeah, so it's so remove from navigation is one thing that we've kind of like built in out of necessity from building applications for clients. So we've kind of like got lots of things in there that are built in that make sense. For instance, like switching out the route navigation is something that a lot of people wanted in their applications, and we built it into the framework. Yeah, you can switch. So just say you're on a tab, just say you're on a contact tab, but for some reason you actually want to switch the tabs and go to like the quote tab, you can actually change it and go to the quote list page, and that will actually switch the selected tab. So it's got these sort of finer details. I mean, you could say that in some ways that these features kind of break the MVVM. But we find that we kind of have to have them to be able to deliver the applications that the client wants. So that's why they're there.
Cool. Okay. And then do you have like sample apps and things like that in GitHub that people can take a look at, like real applications that are using FreshMvvm?
Yeah, so at the moment, this FreshMvvm sample app, which is part of the code on FreshMvvm, is probably the most up-to-date one. But I'll publish up this sort of advanced complex navigation sample, which is something I've been working on. So if we go back into this, is this it? Let me just run this. So this is an example of how I would put an application together normally. So it's actually got an example of your multiple navigation stacks, modal pages, and actually jumping. So this has got some complex. So if you come in here, you can see here I've got this menu that comes down, and you can jump to the contact us page, or you can jump to the contacts. And this is a good example of how we do the more complex requirements that we get.
All right, and you have that link there?
So I'll upload this. I don't actually have a link, but I can upload it today. So okay. I can put a link to the show notes, I guess.
Yeah, so on our site we'll have a link there. If you come back to the guest lectures, we can provide that there. All right, and then do you have any plans for supporting just classic Xamarin, Android, Xamarin iOS instead of Xamarin.Forms?
Yeah, so from our perspective, we probably won't. This is just designed for Xamarin.Forms, and we'll probably just keep it that way. So yeah, no support for the traditional style.
Yeah, but there's other frameworks, there's Mvvm Cross and Mvvm Lite that do support that are pretty fantastic as well. So
yes,
definitely check those out. If you
that's what I would say. Like I mean, if I was going to do iOS and Android, the traditional style, I'd probably look at Mvvm Cross or Mvvm Lite, maybe even reactive UI.
Great. All right. So if anyone,
yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in there. But otherwise, we're a little over time. So I want to say thank you, first of all, to Michael. Thank you for your time, and thank you for creating FreshMvvm for all of us, including yourself. Definitely something to check out on your next project. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Fantastic presentation. Remember, everyone, these guest lectures are recorded, and they're exclusively available to Xamarin University students. I'll try to get the recording up in the next few days onto our site, and you can go review it at your leisure. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, thanks for having me.
No problem.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you once again, Michael, and we'll see you all in class.
Thank you.